result of that terrible collision August 12th a year ago with Jack Tatum, number 32 of the Oakland Raiders.
The quarterback, and he took like a 2 or 3 step drop, and he raised up to throw the ball. And from his, from the quarterback's action, I knew that he was going to throw the slant. When Stingley extended, he was off the ground and he was kind of suspended in the air. I thought it was an average hit.
When NFL legends talk about facing Jack Tatum, they don't just describe a player, they describe terror. Earl Campbell, one of the strongest running backs in history, once revealed that Tatum gave him the hardest hit of his career. A collision so violent it sent a shock down to his heels and made him think something was seriously wrong. But here's the truth most people miss. Jack Tatum wasn't just a villain who paralyzed careers and changed lives. He was a defender who played by the rules of his time, respected by the very legends who feared him, and his impact on football safety makes him one of the most influential players to ever wear a helmet. So how did one man terrify an entire league and force the NFL to rewrite the rulebook? Jack Tatum didn't just play football, he waged war. His philosophy was simple and brutal. In his own words, he liked to believe that his best hits bordered on felonious assault. This wasn't trash talk, it was a mission statement. Tatum grew up at Ohio State under Woody Hayes, but his professional identity was forged by Oakland Raiders owner Al Davis, who prized intimidation above everything else. Davis built a roster of misfits and rebels who thrived on fear. In the Raiders' defensive scheme known as the Soul Patrol, Tatum was the enforcer. His assignment was the middle of the field, the no-fly zone, and his mandate was to ensure that any receiver daring to cross it would pay a physical tax that outweighed the value of a completed pass. Tatum transformed the free safety position into a psychological weapon. Before him, safeties were the last line of defense, playing deep to prevent touchdowns. Tatum inverted this role. He played like a hunter, moving toward the line of scrimmage with intent to disrupt. He understood that fear was a tangible variable in the outcome of a game. If a wide receiver heard footsteps, he would lose focus on the ball, leading to drops and missed opportunities. Tatum's reputation was such that the mere possibility of his presence caused receivers to alter their routes. He once said he was paid to be a warhead, and anyone who came near him should get knocked into hell. This was the terrifying reality for offensive players of the era. They weren't playing against a defender trying to bat the ball away. They were playing against a warhead programmed to detonate on contact. What made Tatum uniquely terrifying was that he often prioritized the hit over the turnover. In many instances, like the immaculate reception, Tatum had the opportunity to intercept the ball but chose instead to separate the receiver from his consciousness. This was a calculated risk. Tatum believed that while an interception ended one drive, a knockout hit could end a receiver's effectiveness for the entire game or the season. Opponents knew that Tatum wasn't playing the ball. He was playing the man. Drop a comment and tell us, would you have been brave enough to run a route over the middle with Jack Tatum waiting? The immaculate reception is celebrated as the greatest play in NFL history, but at its core, it's a story about a Jack Tatum hit. On December 23, 1972, in the AFC divisional playoff game between the Oakland Raiders and Pittsburgh Steelers, the trajectory of two franchises was altered by a split-second decision Tatum made. The Steelers, trailing 7-6 with 22 seconds remaining on 4th and 10, were on the brink of elimination. Quarterback Terry Bradshaw, under immense pressure, scrambled and heaved a desperate pass toward running back John "Frenchie" Fuqua. Fuqua found himself at the epicenter of the violence. As the ball arrived at the Oakland 35-yard line, so did Jack Tatum. In a modern context, a safety might play the ball to secure an interception or bat it down. Tatum, true to his nature, ignored the ball entirely. He saw an opportunity to deliver a punishing blow to Fuqua. The collision was seismic. Tatum launched himself into Fuqua's back just as the ball arrived. The force sent Fuqua crashing to the turf and, crucially, propelled the football backwards several yards. This ricochet was the direct result of the kinetic energy Tatum transferred into Fuqua's body. Fuqua's experience of the play is defined by trauma. He has famously maintained silence regarding whether the ball hit him or Tatum, often wearing a shirt that reads, "I'll never tell." However, beneath the folklore lies a darker reality. Fuqua admitted in later interviews that he knew he had to be knocked out, acknowledging the severity of the impact. The collision was violent enough to render him momentarily unconscious or disoriented, effectively removing him from the play's consciousness while Franco Harris ran into history. The secret Fuqua keeps may not just be about who touched the ball. It may be that the violence of the hit erased the clarity of the memory. Franco Harris, the hero of the play, has always acknowledged the ferocity of the collision that set his miracle in motion. He noted that Tatum never plays the ball at all and seems interested only in unloading a tremendous hit in the back of Frenchie Fuqua. Harris's ability to anticipate the ricochet was miraculous, but it was Tatum's decision to blow up the receiver that created the opportunity. The legitimacy of the immaculate reception rests entirely on the assertion that Tatum hit the ball. This moment birthed the bitter rivalry between the Steelers and Raiders. Tatum was the antagonist in this narrative, the villain whose aggression inadvertently birthed the Steelers dynasty. As the 1970s progressed, the rivalry between the Pittsburgh Steelers and Oakland Raiders escalated to genuine hatred. At the heart of this conflict was a fundamental disagreement about the nature of the sport. Joe Green, the formidable leader of the Steelers' steel curtain defense, acknowledged the physical dominance of his own team but viewed the Raiders' approach, specifically that of Tatum and George Atkinson, as distinctively malicious. The tension reached its peak during the 1976 season. The Raiders' secondary, nicknamed the Soul Patrol, began targeting Steelers wide receiver Lynn Swann with a series of hits that the Steelers organization deemed outside the bounds of sport. George Atkinson delivered a forearm blow to the back of Swann's head, causing a severe concussion. This followed a pattern of intimidation that Tatum and the Raiders employed against the acrobatic receiver. The violence against Swann prompted Steelers head coach Chuck Noll to deliver one of the most famous indictments in NFL history. Noll declared that there was a criminal element in the NFL, specifically pointing a finger at the Raiders' defensive backs. He stated that George Atkinson's hit on Lynn Swann was with intent to maim and not with football in mind. He went on to say there is a certain criminal element in every aspect of society, and apparently we have it in the NFL too. Noll's use of the term criminal element was unprecedented. It moved the discussion of football violence from the sports page to the legal docket. The accusation led to a defamation lawsuit filed by George Atkinson against Chuck Noll and the Steelers, demanding $2 million in damages. This became known as the criminal element trial. Although Tatum was not the plaintiff, his hits were Exhibit A in the argument regarding the Raiders' culture. The defense argued that Tatum and Atkinson operated as a unit that threatened the safety of opponents. Joe Green supported his coach but lamented the distraction. Green recognized that the Raiders used violence as a wedge to disrupt the Steelers' focus. The animosity was personal. Joe Green later described the Raiders' defensive backs as hoodlums and thugs. Green distinguished between the hard-hitting football of the Steelers, which was nose-to-nose, and the cheap shots of the Raiders, which often occurred when a player's back was turned. This rivalry underscored how terrifying Tatum was. He wasn't just feared by the offensive players he hit, he was reviled by the toughest defensive players in the league. The jury in the criminal element trial ultimately ruled in favor of Noll, legally validating the description of the Raiders' tactics as bordering on criminal behavior. If the immaculate reception defined Tatum's role in NFL lore, the hit on Darryl Stingley defined his role in NFL infamy. It occurred during a preseason game between the Raiders and the New England Patriots. Patriots wide receiver Darryl Stingley was running a slant pattern across the middle, deep in Tatum's territory. Quarterback Steve Grogan threw a pass that was high and behind Stingley. As Stingley leaped and contorted his body to adjust for the errant ball, he exposed his back and head, leaving himself defenseless. Tatum, closing in at full speed, did not deviate. He launched himself into the receiver. The collision was catastrophic. Tatum's shoulder pads slammed into Stingley's helmet and neck area with massive velocity. The force compressed Stingley's spinal cord and shattered his fourth and fifth cervical vertebrae. Stingley crumpled to the ground, his body going limp instantly. Under the rules of 1978, the hit was legal. It was a shoulder-to-helmet collision, which was the standard technique for separating a receiver from the ball. However, the context made it morally reprehensible to many observers. The hit was not necessary to prevent a touchdown or completion. It was a hit delivered solely to punish the receiver. Stingley was left a quadriplegic, confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life. The tragedy was compounded by the interaction between the two men. Tatum never visited Stingley in the hospital, a fact that haunted Stingley until his death in 2007. Tatum claimed he attempted to visit but was turned away by Stingley's family. He wrote that he understood why Darryl is considered the victim, but he'd never understand why some people look at him as the villain. Tatum maintained that it could have happened to anybody and that it was a clean hit. However, the silence spoke volumes. Stingley described the deep pain caused by Tatum's lack of outreach. The incident reportedly destroyed Tatum internally. His close friend John Hicks described Tatum as becoming somewhat of a recluse after the hit. It was something that ate on him for his whole life, Hicks said. While Tatum publicly projected the image of the unrepentant assassin, privately, the guilt of paralyzing a man in an exhibition game contributed to his social withdrawal. The tragedy highlighted a stark contrast. While Tatum stayed away, Raiders head coach John Madden rushed to the hospital. Madden visited Stingley daily, staying with him for months and forming a lifelong friendship with the Stingley family. Observers have long speculated that the emotional toll of the Stingley injury was a significant factor in Madden's decision to retire from coaching shortly thereafter. In 1979, a year after the Stingley tragedy, Tatum faced a different kind of opponent, Earl Campbell. The Houston Oilers running back was a physical anomaly who ran with a punishing style that mirrored Tatum's defensive philosophy. The collision occurred at the goal line. The Oilers were on the 1-yard line. Everyone in the stadium knew Campbell was getting the ball. He took the handoff and barreled toward the hole. Tatum, timing the snap perfectly, flew up from the secondary to meet him. It was a head-on collision between two of the most violent players in history at maximum velocity. Visually, the play belongs to Earl Campbell. The force of the impact knocked Tatum backward, leaving the safety lying on his back in the end zone. Campbell stumbled backward but fell into the end zone for a touchdown. To the fans and the highlight reels, it was Campbell running over Tatum. However, the internal reality for Campbell was terrifying. Campbell confessed that the hit was the hardest he ever took in his entire career. "The lick I took from Tatum, that's the only time I ever felt somebody hit me," Campbell said. "A shock went down to the heels on my feet and it burned. Nobody knew this, but I was thinking something's wrong." Medical experts reviewing the play decades later suggested that Campbell likely suffered a transient spinal cord contusion or severe whiplash. The burning sensation he described is a classic neurological warning sign, indicating trauma to the spinal column. Campbell had essentially walked away from a hit that could have paralyzed him, much like it did Stingley. This revelation recontextualizes the highlight. Even when Tatum lost the play and gave up the touchdown, he inflicted such profound physical trauma that the opposing player feared his back was broken. That Campbell, a man who built a Hall of Fame career on running through linebackers, felt such distinct terror from a single Tatum hit speaks to the unnatural force the assassin generated. In the wake of the Stingley tragedy, Jack Tatum did not retreat from his assassin moniker. He commercialized it. He authored 3 autobiographies, starting with the 1980 bestseller They Call Me Assassin. In these texts, he doubled down on his philosophy. Critics viewed these books as tasteless, particularly given Stingley's condition. The refusal to apologize became the defining characteristic of Tatum's post-football life. "To go out and apologize for the way I played football, that is never going to happen," he asserted. This stance cemented his role as a villain. Tatum's highlight reel is filled with moments that would result in immediate suspensions in the modern NFL. One of the most famous occurred in Super Bowl 11 against the Minnesota Vikings. Tatum delivered a hit on receiver Sammy White that was so violent it knocked White's helmet completely off his head and sent it flying yards away. White held onto the ball, but the image of the helmet bouncing across the field became a staple of NFL Film's hardest hits compilations. White expressed a warrior-like respect for the hit. He described it as a hell of a lick and compared it to running out in front of a car. This acceptance of risk was characteristic of the players of that era. Jack Tatum is not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. His statistics, 37 interceptions, 3 Pro Bowls, a Super Bowl ring, are comparable to many inductees. However, the shadow of Darryl Stingley looms too large to overcome. As the NFL pivoted to a product focused on safety and offensive prowess, celebrating the assassin became politically impossible. To induct Tatum would be to validate the very criminal element that the league has spent decades trying to erase. The Stingley hit is widely cited as the catalyst for the modern defenseless player rules. The hit demonstrated that legal did not mean acceptable. Today, the NFL explicitly bans hits on defenseless receivers and prohibits launching into an opponent with the crown of the helmet. These regulations are often referred to as the Jack Tatum rules. The league realized that if players like Tatum were allowed to operate without restriction, the sport would become unpalatable to the public and unplayable for the athletes. The evolution of the rulebook is a direct response to the specific style of violence Tatum perfected. Modern players have faced fines for hits that Tatum would have been celebrated for in the 1970s. Jack Tatum was a product of his time, a gladiator in an era that demanded blood. To the Raiders fans, he was a hero. To the Steelers, he was a criminal. To Darryl Stingley, he was the architect of a life-altering tragedy. The testimonies of Franco Harris, Frenchie Fuqua, Joe Green, and Earl Campbell paint a portrait of a player who was undeniably terrifying. He did not just hit to tackle, he hit to dismantle. Whether it was the burning nerve pain of Earl Campbell, the knockout of Frenchie Fuqua that birthed a miracle, or the paralysis of Darryl Stingley, Tatum left a trail of broken bodies that forced the NFL to look in the mirror. Ultimately, Jack Tatum remains the NFL's most complicated figure. He played within the rules of his time, yet his legacy is defined by the destruction those rules allowed. As Frenchie Fuqua keeps his secret and Earl Campbell nurses his old wounds, the legend of the assassin persists. A reminder of a time when football was less a sport and more a war, and when the man in the black jersey number 32 was the most terrifying sight in American sports. If you found this story incredible, share your thoughts below and let us know what other untold NFL legends you want to hear about next.